So I have to say that this is an absolute pleasure to be talking with somebody who has made one of my most favorite films, which is Eyes of Stone. But other than that, I have to say that Nilita is a very versatile and inspiring practitioner. Versatile because she has made documentaries, she has worked on fiction films, she's a talented editor, she's an educator, she has written a novel, she has also she has produced long form essays in the best traditions of investigative journalism. Now, that's a lot. And inspiring because no matter what the challenge in front of her, she has always engaged with the world around her in creative and meaningful ways. So for me, it's a great pleasure to have a conversation with Nilita. So Nilita, I thought that before we go into talking about your specifically about your films, would you tell us a little bit about how you came into filmmaking?
Okay, thank you, Shohini, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you, Madhu and Subasri, for inviting me to PLD and this forum. I am truly honored to be here. And it's a great pleasure that I am talking to you, Shohini, because we go back such a long way. And I'll never forget when Eyes of Stone was first shown. It was my first screening in Delhi, and the media collective literally stormed in, all the energy that you young gals had. And I'll never forget that day. So to start with, how did I get into filmmaking? It was complete serendipity. I had no intention ever of being a documentary filmmaker. All I'd ever seen were films division documentaries, and I shouldn't say I'd seen them because that was the time we all napped when we went to Globe Cinema or Lighthouse in Kolkata to watch, a Hollywood movie or a Bollywood movie, and then this tedious film would begin, which would last for 40 minutes. And that was the time you would rush out to get popcorn or take a good nap. So I absolutely hated documentaries. I didn't know what they were. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to be a creative writer. I wrote a lot, even when I was a child, and I wanted to be a journalist. So that was my dream. And I did a BA in English honors at Delhi University. And then I wanted to go abroad for a proper education because I think I had a pretty squalid education up to that point. So I realized that there was no funding for journalism for foreign students anywhere. And so I managed to get a full scholarship to go study communications at the University of Pennsylvania. And I figured communications, well, that's from there I'll get on to journalism, not realizing I was actually going into a very, very academic program. But entirely serendipitously, in my very first semester, there was this wonderful anthropologist and ethnomusicologist, Dr. Stephen Feld, who was offering a documentary workshop. And it was really the only creative thing in that entire curriculum. So I just said, okay, I'm doing this. And everything changed after that. I still remember there was a film we saw called No Lies, which was just 10 minutes long. And I walked out of that classroom and I literally had to sit down and I couldn't move for a couple of hours because it was it had such a profound influence on me. And so everything changed after that. And I said, this is what I want to do. And somehow I found my way to it. I wanted more training after that workshop. And of course, there were, again, no funding for film schools in the States. So I managed to get funding at an art school, did an MFA in filmmaking, which was actually an utter waste of time. I don't think I learned anything except what not to do. And then from there, I found my way to Mira Nair in New York and got a job as an assistant editor on her, a documentary. Not so far from India Cabaret. And suddenly I was like assistant editor on this big documentary feature, and I just had to figure out how to do it. And I learned, I think, a lot from the experience of just assistant editing and then editing. And then I felt I was ready to make my own film.
For a number of different reasons that I don't want to go in right now, I think that Eyes of Stone is actually quite a path-breaking documentary, in the history of South Asian documentary and outside. Uh, I wanted to know from you, and for those who haven't seen it yet, it is about spirit possession, and it's about this young woman who is the central protagonist of the film. And I'd like Nilita to share with us now uh, how she decided to go into this. Nilita, why did you go in the direction of spirit possession? How did you choose the location? How did you choose your protagonist? How did you decide to make the film in the way that you did?
So again, I think everything I've done in my life and my whatever I have done has been completely accidental. I don't think there was ever a course, that I was following. So with the possession story, it just so happened that when I was a college student in Delhi, I was staying with my grandparents when I was 18 years old and 19 years old. And there was this family of servants who lived as part of that house at the back. And so while I went to Indraprastha College and studied English honors, there was Pori, who was also 18 years old, who lived in the servants' quarters. Uh, and I noticed that Pori would sometimes she would be, cleaning the driveway, etc. And she had, she would be this very diminutive, hair well oiled, one she hardly spoke. And then there were times when this quiet person would just completely transform. And she would be disheveled. She would not bathe. She would be screaming, and she would be guttural. And then they would just lock her up. And I stayed in the back of the house, very right next to the what they call the servants' quarters, and I would hear her screaming, through the night. And I tried to find out like what was going on with her. And I was sheltered from that experience. Like my grandfather would say to me, don't go there, don't talk to them. These people believe in these things. Stay away from it. So I have to say that that image, to think that we were both the same age and how my life was so completely different from Puri's life, it just stayed with me. I had no way of understanding it. And then strangely, it was really during my MA at the Annenberg School of Communications, where for the first time I was reading incredible material, I'd never been exposed to. I remember I was reading Joseph Campbell, and I was so blown away by creative mythologies. And then I was reading Franz Boas and Claude Levi-Strauss, and somewhere there, I even remember the day it was. I was sitting in Van Pelt Library in the middle of the night reading something, and it was like a penny dropped. It was no other way to explain it. Suddenly, I felt that what I'd seen in Pori was not some kind of aberration. It was symbolic of something deeply structurally cultural and societal. And I had no way of understanding what that was, but I felt it was something. And so I told myself then, I was like 21, and I told myself, well, when I'm back in India, I am going to explore this, you know. So that's how I think that's why it was possession. Um, so when I came back to India, this is after I had worked as an assistant editor and an editor on documentary films, and I felt I could take on a film on my own. I came to India, and but of course nowhere to. In Puri was no longer there. She had left. That family had left. I didn't know how to approach the subject, and then I read Sudhir Kakkar's book Shamans, Mystics, and Doctors, which was really the only work that had addressed possession in any way at all. I actually disagreed very much with the book. Sudhir's a friend now, but that time, of course, I looked up to him tremendously, and I learned so much from that book. But I disagreed with it completely because all his analysis of possession cases had a Freudian twist because he is a psychoanalyst, and I was looking at it totally in social economic terms, But anyway, his book introduced me to the Balaji temple in Mehndipur, which is the big exorcism temple in India. And that's where I did like about a year's worth of field work. So I would just take trips from Delhi on my own, like backpacking, go and stay there in a dharamshala, like all the other, uh, you know, possessed women and families, etc. And just see what was happening at the temple, understand the rituals of the temple, and then also try and follow my own case studies, just like Dr. Sudhir Kakkar had done. I would follow a family, try to keep up with what happened to them later, but totally from a different point of view. Like, who is in the family? How do they earn a living? What is this woman's story? What is going on in her life? So that's how I did a lot of research. And then at the end of that entire stint, where I decided not to make a film there because the Mahants of the temple wanted to tell me exactly which family I could film and where I could film and what I could do and what I couldn't do. So that, of course, was unacceptable. And then after that began a whole journey sort of throughout the north, looking for a different location. So I traveled through, oftentimes with my husband and cinematographer Vangelis. We went through Rajasthan, through Gujarat, through UP, looking at Sufi shrines, Hindu temples, dargahs, which were known for exorcism and possession. And it was really like, you go to one place and somebody will tell you, yahan bhi mata ka mandir hai. Then we would go there, or yahan bhi hota hai, and this peer also cures, and this. So we actually had a possession map of North India, and we were, going and location scouting and trying to. Anyway, I've taken too much time saying this. So eventually we chose the Bhankia Mata temple, which is the one you see in Eyes of Stone. And there was really no reason to choose Shanta in particular, except that at this particular temple, there is the ritual at this temple is such that I know from before that every person, every possessed woman who comes there is going to be cured. That is the prowess of Bhankia Mata, the goddess, that there is no case of possession she cannot cure. The question is, you have to come there either for 5 chokis, which is a legal term there, meaning appearances. You have to make 5 appearances before the goddess, which would be on 5 different Saturdays. So you might get exorcised on that 5th Saturday or on the 7th Saturday, but you will get exorcised. So it was for me the perfect place to make the film, because then I could see a woman when she's ill, when she's possessed, and also after she is cured. Like, who is this cured person? What does being cured mean in this woman's life, right? So that was why I chose Bhankia Mata Mandir, and I chose Shanta because it was her 2nd appearance. So I knew she still had 3, maybe 5 more weeks of possession ahead. That was one reason to choose that. And also I loved her mother. I could never talk to Shanta directly. You can't talk to the possessed women, but I had a brief conversation with her mother and I loved her mother. So that's how it happened.
Should we now see the trailer of the film, and then we can talk a little more about the way you chose to make it? Is this the right time, Nilita, to show the trailer?
I think it's perfect.
तो हर एक भाई ना इतना रहे आज माथा दुख रहा आज हाथ पैर दुख रहा आज बुखार आ रही आज रोटी नहीं भा रही आज सिर दुख रहा है ये सब भाई ना करती है भाई ना कर करके पड़ जाती हैं गड़ जाती हैं धीरे धीरे गलने लग जाती है अपन जाने वही दुख रहा है अपन जाने कमजोर ही दुख रहा है कौन जाने कहीं सी लागी हुई हर एक भाई ना आपा भी लेवा पर इनकी मालूम नहीं पड़े आप कोई देवता के जावा પછી કહેવા ભાઈ યા બીમારી હે મારે અને એ મામા તું રોક દે તો મામા કે જાબો ખેલવા ખપતે છે તો ખેલने लग जाते हैं
अरे हाथ बगन अरे बगन अरे मोरन आगे आते हैं गना दूर रे अरे
बच्ची 10-12 साल की शादी करें हमारे यहाँ बड़ी एज आती ना तो कहता का धर्म नहीं रहते इसलिए मैं छोटी छोटी की दोनों बहना की छोटी छोटी की शादी करूँ वे भी 10-12 साल की ये भी 10-12 साल की बस
ये मेरा पति है ये जो गाड़ी चलाते हैं वे दिल्ली मुंबई जाते रहते 6 दिन में 7 दिन में 1 घंटा पर घर पर रुकेगी बस बाकी नहीं जब भी शादी करी जब भी 20 साल का था और हम 10 साल की थी जब ये सब समझता था हम तो कुछ नहीं समझते तब ये तो समझता था 2 साल भेजी नहीं ससुराल 2 साल बाद में ससुराल भेजी फिर बच्चा हो गया फिर बाद में संतोष 1.5 साल का हुआ और अभी एक छोरा भरी हो गई 2 साल का हुआ उसको गुजर गए फिर ये बन के सो ना कहीं ना कहीं हाथ में दे दे
Thanks for sharing that trailer. Nilita, very quickly, because I don't want to take up too much time, I just want to say that, I had met you at a party, you and Vengalis. And then you talked about the first screening, and you said that you made a film on spirit possession and invited me for the screening. And I did show up with a lot of curiosity, but very convinced that I would not like the film, that it would be an Orientalist film, it would be an exotic film, and I would not like it. And of course, you know what happened after that. As the film unfolded, all those assumptions kind of fell apart. And it was like the most amazing film. And not amazing film even at that time, because there are many films that I've seen in the 90s, which I liked at that time, don't particularly care very much for them right now. But Eyes of Stone, every time I see it, even when I saw it recently for this conversation, it blows me away. So and we've talked about this, before, and I'd like you to share with our audience today, the decisions that you took to make the film the way it is, because it refuses a kind of an explanatory structure, but at the same time you get the most amazing insights about the whole phenomenon of spirit possession. So if you could just tell us a little bit about how you designed the shape and structure of the film.
So just going into it, I knew what I was up against, because this is the quintessential exotic subject. I mean, how can it not be, right? Spirit possession. And of course, I wanted to de-exoticize it as much as possible, because for me, it was not exotic anymore. I had seen so many possessed women by this time and heard so many stories and seen so many different rituals at different exorcism temples that all of this is not what mattered to me. The way I saw it was, like when you have measles, when you're physically ill and you have measles, you get a rash on your body. And when in rural India, uh, when you are in pain, when you're in deep pain, uh, you have sankat. Sankat, the very word in Hindi, means distress. And it is, what is possession called in all over? It's called sankat. So it's a form of distress, and you erupt with that psychological pain, right? So I had seen that. And so the question was, of course, how do you bring it out in a film without being explanatory in any way, because it's so deep and complex that the last thing I want to do is explain anything. And so we had many discussions. Once we knew we had chosen this temple, I knew what was important in their mythology and the folklore. So that had to be presented. So, for instance, I tell you about the goddess, because all these women believe in the goddess. So you have to understand what she means in their lives. Then little things, like it's all about family. It's not about a woman rolling down the hill. It's always in the context of family. So the children are so important, who watch their mothers go through this. The mothers are very important, who sort of take care of their daughters through this. The in-laws and the husbands are visibly absent. I saw this again and again and again, right? I also saw that things like birds are very important, animals are very important, because they believe that when a spirit leaves the woman, she goes into a rooster. And there are many, many roosters in the film. And and all the birds flock there because they know that the spirits are being released. So it's full of pigeons. So the whole thing was to make a film where that mythology is present in the frame. And the social context is always present in the film. And then I have a good 90 minutes where the viewer will initially, of course, be completely shocked and taken aback, but has 90 minutes to see what is going on behind the scenes with the person, which hopefully totally de-exoticizes it by the end.
You had once talked about how your attempt was to make the extraordinary seem ordinary through the passage of the film, and I think you do that remarkably well. Now India has swung in the other way, but when you actually made the film, it was a different kind of India and a different kind of television culture. But the interesting thing is that Eyes of Stone, the opening credit begins with Doordarshan Presents. Now, Doordarshan was very much a cousin of the Films Division films that you discussed, and the documentaries we saw on Doordarshan were not anything like Eyes of Stone. So I know that there is a very long and complicated story there, but if you could just tell us a little bit about some of the insights and lessons you gained from that unlikely marriage.
So I know it's odd, Doordarshan presents. Actually, Doordarshan has never presented the film, not even once. Because the moment, they saw a cut of the film, they said, they banned the film. I have a telegram from Doordarshan. This film is not to be shown anywhere, full stop, right? So this was their response to their film. So why did they fund it? Well, they didn't fund it. One individual funded it, Bhaskar Ghosh. I mean, again, if I would not be a filmmaker today if it wasn't for Bhaskar Ghosh, who happened to be the Director General of Doordarshan at that particular moment in history, right? And then we signed a contract. And then, of course, as happens in Indian bureaucracies, he was shunted off in 2 years for probably being too liberal. And then the person who took over just saw this cut and said, this is not a documentary. That was the other thing. This is not a documentary. And if you want us to pass this film, you have to have a script, You have to have a voiceover. You have to have experts. We want doctors. We want psychoanalysts telling the people that this is superstition and this is wrong. So we reached a kind of deadlock, and they never gave me the money to finish the film. They banned the film. So that is a whole other story. And again, I'm grateful to so many people who, because of whom this film exists. And Cinema du Réel, the Director General's Suzette Glenardel, saw the film. She said, I have to have this film. She wrote to them. She tried to deal with them. No way. So we smuggled out an answer print to Paris. And the Beaubourg actually paid to get a print for the Cinema du Réel Festival in 1990. And once it was shown there, and it got all these amazing reviews, and then it was shown in Delhi and it got amazing reviews, then somehow, Doordarshan let it go. But till today, they have never sold the film, and they have never, I don't know why. I've only managed to get these DVDs made from an optical print. I don't have access to the negative of the film or anything. So it is, it's just very, very sad story. They could have made so much money from this film. This film could have had so much greater exposure had they been proud of it.
People like Bhaskar Ghosh have made such a difference. They have worked in this organization and done so many interesting things. And even if the Doordarshan doesn't realize the value of it, it's fine with us. The film has its place in history. Now, to go to the next film, I mean, of course, you made another film called Sabzi Mandi Ke Heere. But since this particular conversation is about feminist archiving and we have limited time, so we decided to go to the next film you made in the film after that, that you made in 1996, or it was, released in 1996, When Mother Comes Home for Christmas. And that, again, is a very, very interesting story about this woman who lives in rural Sri Lanka, abandoned by her husband, suddenly left to fend for the family and her children, and decides to give them a good life, goes abroad, works in Athens, and to send money back. But interestingly, it is not just a story about a woman taking an individual decision to go and earn a livelihood, but that she is actually driven by an impetus that comes from the government, which is very aggressively exporting housemaids to earn money in foreign exchange. And that again is a very intimate portrayal, just as you had this wonderful rapport with Shanta in Eyes of Stone, you have a similar kind of very, very close rapport with the protagonist of this film. So tell us a little bit, Nilita, about how you got to make the film. And then later on, I'm going to ask you about what narrative strategies you chose to tell that story.
Yeah, so we were living in Athens at the time, and which is actually, prior to the EU, was a very xenophobic society. I used to feel the racism once people realized that I was not Greek. And I noticed that only on Sundays, suddenly people of color would emerge in the marketplace. I mean, I would never see them throughout the week, but on Sundays, there'd be a lot of women from Ethiopia. There were a lot of women from the Philippines. And I thought there were women from India, until I would see them. And then once I just went and started talking to someone, actually asking her in the market, where can you get green chilies anywhere? And this woman, whose name was Mary, we started chatting, and she told me she's from Sri Lanka. And she said, actually, all the women there are from Sri Lanka. And then I got so interested in Mary's story that I started meeting her on Sundays. And then through her, I actually met this entire community of Sri Lankan women. There were about 300 there at the time. And they all met at a Catholic church in Athens on Sundays, because this church was actually the place where they could find jobs. They would create a network, get to know one another. It was the meeting point, whether they were Catholic or Muslim or Buddhist or whatever. So from there, it was an amazing story. There were all these women who hadn't been home in years, and they had left husbands behind, children behind, and they had actually got to Greece through smuggling routes from the Middle East, because Greece officially did not import housemaids. So these were all women who had illegally come there. They were all undocumented. And I thought, what an amazing story, you know. And this was, mind you, we're talking about early 90s when nobody talked about things like globalization or migration or women's work, and this kind of gendered functions. So then I was, of course, very interested in why all from Sri Lanka? Why not from India? Why not from Bangladesh? Why not from Pakistan, right? And so it was doing that kind of research, I found that it was only Sri Lanka that had these trade agreements with Middle Eastern countries, and they actually trained women and sent them abroad because it got rid of their problems of unemployment and underemployment at home. And all these women who went abroad, of course, sent every dollar they earned back home. So it was a huge foreign exchange earner for the country. So that's how, I got into that idea. And of course, by now I had a track record. So to get funding was, relatively easy, right? So I'm now trying to curb my answers because I know I'm speaking too much.
No, so tell me, Nilita, just tell us a little bit, because stylistically it's a little bit different. And there are these amazing passages of calm and stillness that I absolutely love about the film. And then, of course, there is this, interesting dynamic in the film that you watch very, very intimately. So what was the kind of narrative strategy that Vengelis and you had, planned in your heads?
So in this film, it was very different because I was in some sense out of my depth because I did not speak Sinhala. I had actually never been to Sri Lanka until I got interested in this idea. So I was working in a language that was not my own, right? In the Greek section, I tried to once engage Josephine, the character I finally chose for the film. The reason I chose her, I should mention why I chose her over all the other women, was all these women were undocumented. She had a very influential employer who managed to get her working papers. Not as a housemaid, because there's no such thing there, but he managed to get her a visa. So she actually was somebody who could finally go home. And she was making a visit back home for the first time in 8 years. So for me, that was very important for two reasons. One, I did not want her to get into trouble once the film came out, because we had got funding also from the Greek television center, Earth. So I didn't want the person to get deported, right? So she was safe. And also, I knew her story by then, that she had these 3 children in Sri Lanka, and one was in an orphanage. And here she was taking care of a 2-year-old, and she had left her 2-year-old back when she left. For the first time 10 years ago. So it was, I knew I would be able to follow her in these 2 different worlds. And that's why I chose her. And I realized that I could not, whenever I talked to Josephine in Greece, I felt that I was actually taking away her voice because she was not fluent in English. And so when she was talking to me in English, she was not herself. And I don't speak Sinhala. So I just decided this film has to be very different. I'm not going to, I have a really strong relationship with her, but that's off camera. I'm going to show her life in Greece, which is about work, right? And is about drudgery, and it's about cleaning, and is of course joyous when she is taking care of this 2-year-old whom she loves like she's never been able to love her own children, because she's never been there with them. And I came upon this idea, how do I tell the story in a film where I'm not speaking to my character? So I came upon this idea that the letters, now over all these years, 10 years, this is pre-internet, pre-cell phones, right? The family is writing letters to one another. She's writing to each of her children, they are writing back. And of course, every letter is preserved. So I came upon this idea that I'm going to get the letters, I'm going to choose sections from letters. I'm going to get the writers of the letters to read the letters. And I will use that to structure the film. So that's how, it sort of works. These letters are a punctuation throughout the film. And then once Josephine herself goes back to Sri Lanka and she's meeting her children again, then of course it's just entirely kind of observational, because they're all talking to one another and there are all these tensions, etc. And then I can observe and choose and craft what are the important issues around her life, which are all about money, which are all about commodification and money, and what she as a mother can give them. So it was, so the two halves of the film are quite different in that sense.
I think at this point it would be good to have the trailer of When Mother Comes Home for Christmas. Is it possible to see that now?
எனது பெயர் பாட்லி. இந்த அப்பா டாக்டர் வெளிநாட்டில் இங்கு போர்டாகி இருக்கின்றேன்.
எனது பெயர் சிமியோன். எனது அப்பா வாஸ்டர். எனது அம்மா வசிக்குமிடம் பிரான்ஸ். அவர் வேலை செய்யார். ஹவுஸ்மேட், வீட்டில் வேலை செய்கின்றார்.
எனது பெயர் ரஜீவ். நான் படிக்கும் இடம் சென்ட் ஜான் பொஸ்கோ. எனது அம்மா குவைத்தில் நர்ஸ் வேலை பார்க்கிறார். எனக்கு அப்பா இல்லை. எனக்கு விருப்பமான விளையாட்டு கிரிக்கெட்.
මගේ නම සුමින්ද ශ්‍රීජිත් පෙරේරා. මගේ අම්මා වැඩ කරන්නේ ග්‍රීසියේ. මගේ අම්මා වැඩ කරන්නේ පොඩි බබෙක් බලා ගන්නවා.
Just forget about it, okay? You found me. I'm fine. You can quit your worrying and just leave me alone. How can I possibly do that? Look, I ain't dead, okay? Now, I've survived the past 7 years, and I intend to go another 7. But what life is to you, Drusilla, is it just
Would you be able to
survival?
take care of Isadora full time?
I just can't do it. It's impossible. Just ask Josie. It drives me crazy. In the beginning, I was breastfeeding. I mean, to breastfeed and being pregnant was the best life I have got. It was very nice to be in my body at that times, but I can't do it. I admire Josie because she was able to do everything. It was heavy work here with the baby around, and you remember, even when she was a little, and me, I could not do it. I could not do it. Sometimes I was crying because I was exhausted and I wanted to do my house.
When I come back on Monday,
yes,
she used to complain to me, Josie, I'm tired.
It's a special gift she has for that.
Where's my baby? Where's my silly baby? Where's my silly baby? Whose baby?
Mine. Mommy.
Not mommy's, it's mine.
Together.
Together, you? Come here.
Thanks for the clip. It's such a deeply moving film because here she is, working so hard. Everything that she earns, she sends to her family. But when she goes back, of course, they're only talking to her about money, but also what the children hold against her is her absence. And she's absent because she's working to give them a good life. It's a deeply, deeply moving film, actually. Nilita, and I think we have enough time, Subasri. Am I right? How much time do we have?
We do. We have about 23 minutes. Yes.
Okay. So Nilita, you can take your time and respond to the next question. I know you're feeling very pressured, for time. I want to, talk about your writing right now. It's interesting that you said that you wanted to be a creative writer, and actually you did end up being a creative writer. And in 2005, you wrote Homespun. Here's my copy. It's a novel I thoroughly enjoyed reading, as I told you at that time. And then in 2015, you write these long form essays about this one Monju Dash, who is a woman who lives in rural Bengal, again, who has gone to the US to work in somebody's house and inadvertently gets caught up in this racket of insider trading information, information trading, insider information trading. And you have picked up this woman who became in the larger narrative. There are these two men, one who was giving that information called Anil Kumar, and for people who haven't read the essay, and another person, am I getting his name right? Rajaratnam, is that what his name is?
That's right,
and
yes.
He was the one who was paying this Anil Kumar millions of dollars to get that information on the basis of which he would invest. And Anil Kumar was actually routing all the money that he was getting from this man in the name of Monju Dash, who was this woman, had no idea, this unlettered woman who was working in his house. And then there is a court case, this becomes a big sensation. Turns out, interestingly, that both these men are Nilita's class friends from college or something like that. And then Nilita starts pursuing the protagonist who should actually be in the story, but is now getting forgotten, which is Monju Dash, whose identity has been stolen. And this man gets her to sign all these papers and then uses her identity to get the money back. And then, of course, she's packed off to India. She's promised a certain amount of money, which she never gets. And then Nilita gets on the trail and starts pursuing the story of Monju Dash. And what emerges out of that are two very, very interesting, very well-researched long-form essays. One got published in The Nation in 2015, and then another in Caravan in 2016. So Nilita, tell us about this work that you did, because and I'm not talking about Homespun here. I hope I have another occasion to talk about that novel, because that also deserves a discussion. But this, because we are talking about three protagonists in this conversation. One, Shanta in Eyes of Stone, Josephine in When Mother Comes Home from Christmas, and Monju Dash, who is the protagonist of your long form essays. So if you could tell us a little bit about how you got into that track.
So actually, Anil Kumar was never a friend of mine. I don't think I've ever met him. But Rajaratnam certainly was a very good friend of mine when I was at the Annenberg School. He was at the Wharton School of Management, which is right opposite Annenberg. And the reason I came to know him is because we were both staying at the International House of Philadelphia for that first year. And so all the international students, got to know one another. So we were very good friends all through the 90s, up to the 90s. And after that, I lost track of him completely. But then suddenly I'm in India one day and he's all over all the television networks doing this perp walk, arrested, in handcuffs. And then unfolds the largest insider trading trial in 2009. And so I'm just like pulverized by this. But because if you think of, if you have a really close friend, the next thing they're this arch criminal. It's just incredible. I couldn't believe this was happening to Rajaratnam. So anyway, when I was back in New York and the trial was going on, I just said, let me go to the trial one day. I didn't realize that any Aam Aadmi can just walk into the trial. So I just went in there and I got completely hooked, right? So I started going, whenever I had time, I'd start going to the trial. It just went on for months, that trial. And then one day at the trial, this extraordinary thing happened where actually it was Anil Kumar. By the way, he's not just any person, he's the managing director of McKinsey, okay? So he was the one who, while he was working for McKinsey, was giving insider information on McKinsey's clients to his college buddy, Rajaratnam. Rajaratnam was knew everything beforehand, right, about all these companies, and was making these stock decisions and making millions of dollars and paying Anil Kumar $1 million a year as bonus. That money, what Anil Kumar, because he had Manju Das's, she had worked for him for 10 years in California. He had her passport, he had all her papers. He had opened offshore accounts in various countries in her name, and he was stashing the money there. So he wasn't paying taxes on it. And McKinsey didn't know he was moonlighting in this fashion. So anyway, what happened that day in court was the name of Manju Das came up. It was actually the Rajaratnam defense lawyer who was grilling Anil Kumar, because Anil Kumar had got a plea bargain with the US government. I'll give you all the crap on Rajaratnam. He'll get off scot-free, right? So he had given, so he was being grilled on who is this Manju Das and why isn't she here as a witness? Because you have, the Rajaratnam defense was trying to show that he was trafficking this woman. And why isn't this woman here? And you are the one who's putting $1 million in her name. We've got nothing to do with it. This is your money, you're doing this. They were just trying to discredit the guy. But of course, for me, I mean, $1 million housemaid named Manju Das, it's, I mean, beyond a red flag. I mean, the judge didn't pick up on it. In fact, the whole thing was just thrown out of court, right? But for me, it was, who is this $1 million maid, you know? And so I just said, I have to find her. And chances are she probably has no idea, right? So that part of the story never came out in the insider trading trial. Nobody wrote about Manju Das. So my whole thing was to try and go and find her. And that was it was very exciting for me, actually, I have to say, because I was looking at court documents and, you know, being a detective. And through that, I somehow managed to, through the court documents, I managed to find a copy of her passport through which she had got a visa. But all the information was redacted, except for West Bengal and the name of the district. And from there, somehow, I mean, I managed to find her, and then I landed up at her doorstep, literally. And she had no idea who the hell I was and how I'd found her. And then I had to tell her that she was in the New York court, that her name was in all the papers for one day, and that she had millions of dollars to her name. And I just realized then that he had got rid of her. You see, he had gotten her completely out of the way. And my actually finding her was in a way threatening her and her life. So I wanted to make a film about this. And, you know, and I then realized that she was in the middle of nowhere and nobody knew this, including her. And I was actually endangering her. So for years, I just kept up with her. I kept meeting her, but I did not tell the story until the trials had ended. Everybody had their whatever conviction they had. And then I decided to do it as a kind of long form journalism, came out simultaneously actually in Caravan and Nation, so that the story would be out before Anil Kumar found out and could do anything about it, because he had the most expensive lawyers protecting him, you know. Anyway, I'm not going to go on because we have to have a little time for questions, but people can read the articles. They're, you know, easily available.
Nilita, would you like a little clip to be shown from the Manju Das?
Madhu, what do you think? It's I think would you rather have questions or?
No, I think we have time. We can go.
Okay, excellent.
5 minutes,
okay,
yeah.
Let's start watching it then, just a little bit. Yeah. So this is not I just explained while you, this is not a film I made. I actually never made the film I wanted to make. But because of that article I wrote, I've never had this experience, but it just literally, I know now what going viral means. For someone who's just not even active on social media, the pieces went viral. And I had, over a course of 48 hours, I had the number of letters I got from around the world of people who wanted to help Manju Das, right? So I opened a GoFundMe campaign for her, which her employer managed to shut down after 48 hours by using his lawyer. So it was on for really just 48 hours. But I managed to raise money for her, you know, with that story. And so what I do in this little thing you're going to see is I actually go and film my meeting her this time now that the story's out and she's actually safe. And I'm actually just giving her the money. And it's also a record for all the people who did donate money, that the money went to her. So it was all the letters were, we gave her all the letters and we gave this money. So just this little snippet will just introduce you to Manju Das. I'm on my way to visit Manju Das in her village in North Bengal. 5 years ago, when I first arrived at her doorstep, I was the bringer of bad news. She had no idea that her ex-employer in California had been stashing away millions of dollars in her name. Anil Kumar, by his own admission, had got the money by providing insider information on his company McKinsey's clients to his college friend Rajaratnam, the founder and CEO of the billion-dollar hedge fund Galleon. Manju Das had no idea of the role she had unwittingly played in the scam. Kumar, in testifying against Rajaratnam, had cooperated with the US government, thereby getting himself a plea deal and a get-out-of-jail-free card. This time, I'd come with happier news. I'd brought Manju a copy of Caravan magazine and $9,000 that I'd raised from well-wishers from around the world who had responded with outrage and empathy to her story. When I'd first met the family in 2011, they were running a small roadside dhaba, serving lunch and dinner to passers-by. But they never could finish the upstairs, never could build the rooms they wanted to rent out. Manju didn't know about the big betrayal. She had only recounted a lesser one. When she was sent back to her village after 10 years of work abroad, her employer had promised her 2 years extra pay, which never arrived.
पेपर में अब कौन सा पेपर में क्या लिखा है वो हम नहीं बता सकेंगे सिर्फ इधर साइन करना पड़ेगा हम साइन भी कर देंगे तो सब बड़ा हाथ खुद দিয়ে সই করা
তো এটা তো अंग्रेजी চিঠি এটা লেখা আছে please use this letter as your authorization to accept instructions from Anil Kumar on behalf of my account. In addition, please copy Mr. Anil Kumar on all correspondence. Sincerely, Manju Das. তুমি চিঠি লিখেছো কি যেও কিছু ইনস্ট্রাকশন আছে তোমার অ্যাকাউন্ট জন্য ও অনিল কুমার দিবে
25000
$250,000 $250,000 গিয়েছে গ্যালিয়ন্স অ্যাকাউন্ট বারমুডা হ্যাঁ আইল্যান্ড আছে সালের 4টার সময় এটা অ্যামাউন্ট ওখানে যায় 250
quarterly
$1 million a year limited partner
वो बोले हम साइन करो तो हम साइन कर देते हैं सिर्फ हमारा नेम इंग्लिश में लिख सकता है लेकिन पूरा हम कुछ लिख नहीं सकेगा गरीब आदमी है अगर बैंक में हम जाए तो हम बोले हम एक अकाउंट खोलना चाहते हैं तो उस टाइम वो लोग क्या होता है जो नहीं आप ये डॉक्यूमेंट चाहिए वो डॉक्यूमेंट चाहिए है ना उसको लेके आओ तब हम देखेंगे फोटोकॉपी उसको देखेंगे सामना सामने साइन करेंगे अगर ये जो इतना हुआ हम तो सिर्फ साइन अगर हम करें तो कौन सा पेपर में किया वो तो ये चेक नहीं किया वो तो खुद ही हमारा नाम बोला तो ये नाम पे पैसा जमा करो तो वो बैंक का आदमी कैसा है जो बैंक पे किसी को डॉक्यूमेंट तो दिए से या तो बैंक अकाउंट खोलो की
ना होता तो इम्पोर्टेंट आदमी तो जान पहचान का कोई होगा उधर
नहीं वो इतना दिमाग है अनिल कुमार का इतना दिमाग है वो पैसे से वो इतना आदमी মানে এমন এমন লোক আছে সোর্স আছে ও করতে পারত
But I think that was actually very interesting because when I was reading it, I really wanted to take a look at her, and I think that this has been very good actually to show the clip. Nilita, we have time for one question, and I'm going to ask you this question. And because this is for feminist archiving purposes, I feel that what should also be archived are projects that feminists had conceived with desire and passion, but that never found fruition. Do you have any such project that you wanted to do, but never ended up doing?
Yeah, there was a feature film, fiction film that I almost got made, Bargat. I even had funding for it. So it was a script that was chosen by Rotterdam as one of the top 10 scripts. And I had money from France. I had NFTC had money put in, but I also had these German producers who at that time, Paradise Films, they were huge. And they raised the budget to $1 million. And after that, the $1 million could never be raised because I, at that time, had just become a mother. And I had a 2-month-old baby. And I was overwhelmed. There was no way I could do a film and I could be the perfect mother that I wanted to be. Because a flaw I have in my character, a big flaw, is perfectionism. I have to be a perfectionist about everything. And there was deep anxiety because I could the casting was done, the locations were done, but suddenly I had this multi-million-dollar budget and the producers were just, it was something that never happened. I will always regret it because had it happened, of course, my history would have been a different one. So yeah. But at least I'm still laughing about it now, 20 years later.
I must also say that many years back, you wrote a script that you once shared with me. And there was this very striking sequence of a woman, at a tube well, drawing water. And it was going to be this magic realist film.
That's the film, Shohini. That's the film. It was called Bargat. It was called Bargat. Yeah. It almost happened.
Very, very vividly.
Yeah. The film that never was, except in my head.
But films that never get made also have a place, and we have to archive those as well. So now perhaps, Subasri, we can open up for the questions that people might have.
Right. Thank you both for this conversation. There are a few questions. I'm going to read them out, and Nilita, if you could just respond to them. Soma Basu asks, there's always this debate between what is, in quotes, and what should be, again in quotes, and what should be, again in quotes, is defined by men. From 1990 to 2021, this debate or compulsion to choose between explorations and taboo breaking by doctors from sexuality in toilets for women still exists. And here she's referring to Nehlani's comment about lipstick under my burqa. Do you see this ossification or pattern that has been challenged, even if slowly? What are your thoughts on it? Like what should be shown in a movie? That's what she's saying.
Or maybe what should not be shown in a movie.
Yeah.
I think that would be an interesting way to do it. So, it's so unclear. It's so unclear because you never know what it is that is going to create a problem. And it's never what you might expect will be a problem. So I'll just give an example. When Mother Comes Home for Christmas, what I thought, there is a scene in the film where the entire family, with the exception of the daughter, are sitting in the bus that the mother has bought for her son. And they are discussing the daughter who is not there. And they're saying, she has a boyfriend, and they are saying, what are his intentions? Is he just having a good time with her, or does he seriously want to marry her, right? And of course, we filmed that, and that I had a real moral quandary about, is do I show this in the film? Because Norma, the daughter, is not there, and her feelings are going to be terribly hurt to know when she sees the film that her family was talking about her this way, and there could be a real rift in the family. So I showed the cut to Josephine and I said, what do you think? And she said, oh, no, you should absolutely show it because this is the truth. This is what we didn't know his intentions. So that scene is in the film. Now there's a scene that I would never have imagined that would cause problem, and it caused a huge problem. And that is, there's a scene in the film when Josephine comes home for that brief month. The entire family collects and they sit on the ground and they're eating from this communal plate, which they always do, right? That scene, when it was broadcast on Greek television, created a shindy in the Sri Lankan community, saying you are showing Sri Lankans in a terrible light and we will lose our jobs because we are all eating from the same plate. And it became such an issue that I had to get the priest of the church to actually have a meeting and talk to everyone and say there's nothing wrong with that scene. It just shows family and it shows friendship and it shows belonging. It does not show dirt, because the people were attacking Josephine for it. You see, so, this was a problem in documentary. I have faced it in film after film after film. I'm sure every documentary filmmaker faces this. You never know what's going to give offense and to whom and why. So my response to that is you work with the best of intentions. That's, and as carefully as possible.
I couldn't agree more with you on that. Well, Madhushri Mukherjee has a comment and a question which I think you've already answered, but I'm going to read it out anyway. She says, this is such a brilliant and insightful film. I think she's speaking of Eyes of Stone. You clearly show how this patriarchal system leads to her illness, to the expression of a trauma through a socially accepted channel and its cure, which provides profound insight into a folk cure of a temporary mental illness of a kind that Western medicine struggles with. And then she asks, why was Doordarshan hostile to it? I mean, you've kind of answered that, but in case you would like to add anything to that.
Because, in India, I mean, we are so elitist in India, right? I mean, God. So we call things primitivism. We are the first ones to call certain things primitivism and superstition. We don't see things as really organic forms of healing. These are real forms of healing. There's no psychoanalysis available for the village woman, right? I mean, which shrink is she going to go and lie down on a couch and talk about how her husband is treating her? But they have the goddess. They have these amazing local confluences around temples and dargahs and shrines, and which are not just confessionals. The spirit speaking through the woman is confessing, is telling the world about her sorrow and her sadness. So it's not only that confessional, these are also performative places where women sing and they dance and they compose poetry, and there's a spotlight on them. It is so incredibly rich. I mean, how do you expect a bureaucrat to even understand that? They're not willing to understand it. They just want to hear their expert opinions from various doctors about, right, this is what India is. And it's an incredibly elitist position, So you're trying to make a non-elitist film, you run into these kinds of problems all the time. It's just about the headscape of the rulers of the land, right?
The situation has changed a little bit right now, because I think for years, this part of things, things that could not be explained or science didn't have an answer for it, whether it was spirit possession or, the Ganesh drinking milk. There could be nothing other than a kind of a scientific explanation for it. But now, of course, we have gone in the completely other direction, running away from any scientific explanation as far as possible. So, yeah, go ahead, Subasri. Sorry, I had to just say that.
No, that's fine. Geeta Sehgal asks, do you think you worked in a golden age of observational documentary, which is not so appreciated now? Or is there a lot more of it available? I can think of exceptions, but they seem to prove the rule for television.
Yeah, for me, observational documentary is the hallmark. It's where it's the most difficult thing to do, actually, and the most powerful. I think actually observational cinema is very alive and well. It's not there in India, sadly. And we are very, very sort of agenda-driven, message-driven films. But they're very, very alive and well in Europe, actually. I mean, one filmmaker I absolutely adore, the Italian Gianfranco Rossi.
Yeah.
Oh, I love his films. It's just purely observational. And I mean, there's this film made just last year, right? Honeyland. I don't know how many of you saw that. I mean, it's completely observational. It's powerful, incredibly powerful, and powerful about issues they're always about issues, but their issues are not fronted and explained, and so I think observational cinema is actually very alive and well. I think we need more practitioners. That's what we need.
Right. Soma Basu asks, when your film, When Mother Comes Home for Christmas, somehow reminds me of the wet nurses trafficked from India and Nepal to China. Do you think motherhood, she puts it in quote, has always been surreptitiously or not commercialized? It's an interesting question. Yeah.
Yeah, I think women's gender functions have always been commercialized. I mean, I'm thinking, even if I'm thinking of Eyes of Stone now, I'm even thinking of, girls being married off at the age of 8 and 10, right? To become these obligatory slaves in the homes of their husbands and in-laws, right? It's a form of commodification, that kind of gendered work. And I saw that, I didn't think of it particularly in these terms then, but I see it in Shanta's slavery, her servitude to her husband and in-laws. And of course, by extension, all the women we see in the film, right, at the temple. I saw that in Josephine's story, the French mother being able to go and do practice a sport called sun yachting, which for God's sakes I hadn't even heard of, for 3 weeks at an end, while Josephine is there running the house and taking care of everything. The privilege of the first world mother that relies on this third world mother, right? And of course, I mean, in the Manju Das story, you have it crossing the globe. You have this very poor woman from West Bengal who's here in California, not only taking care of this entire rich household, but then also being a kind of conduit for her employer to not pay taxes, right? I mean, she has no identity other than what he can use. And so, of course, then you think of the woman's womb, and you think of the various ways in which she can be commodified. I think very well. I feel very strongly about this now. When I look back at my own work, I see this very strong trend there, this theme there.
I would also, since we are coming to the close of this conversation, say that Nilita, what would be really great is if at some point, if Bargat never gets made, but for us to be able to archive your script, and that should exist in some form.
Right. Yes. Right. That's a thought.
Yeah, thank you. And I would push one step ahead and say, hopefully, maybe it will get made. There's never any such thing of a work that can't get made. So I'm actually hoping and wishing that we actually get to see this film someday. So all the very best for it. And we'll close now because there aren't many questions. I think many people on the chat window thanking both you and Shohini and saying they really enjoyed the conversation. So thank you all for being there for this conversation. It was really lovely. We'll have to close now. Just a quick thing to say that in the next edition, which will be the final one of this part of the series, the 6th one, artist Maya Rao will be featured. I think PLD will let you know the date and time of when that happens. But thank you all so much. And Nilita, all the very best. May you go from strength to strength, making more films.
Thank you so much, Subasri. Thank you, Shohini. This was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.